China revives TAZARA. The $1.4 billion deal that will transform Zambia and Tanzania. TAZARA is back, and not just back, but reborn. After decades of neglect, China has announced a staggering $1.4 billion investment to modernize one of Africa's most iconic railways. But this raises big questions. Why now? What does China gain? And more importantly, what does Zambia stand to lose or gain in this megadeal? This is not just a railway upgrade, this is geopolitics, economics, and global power all wrapped into one. And tonight, we break down the real story behind the $1.4 billion that could reshape Southern Africa forever. Good day, viewers. Welcome to another edition of the InspirAfrica Official. I'm Nakash. What a week it's been, my friends. As I sit here preparing this story, I can't help but reflect on how history has a way of coming full circle, sometimes in ways we never imagined. Today, we bring you a story that's about to reshape the future of two nations, and perhaps the entire African continent. Imagine a railway line, stretching across 1,860 kilometers of rugged African terrain, through mountains, valleys, across rivers, and into the heart of the continent's mineral wealth. A railway built 50 years ago by brothers from the East, when the world turned its back on African independence. A railway that once symbolized freedom itself, carrying the hopes of nations breaking free from colonial chains. Now picture that same railway silent, decaying, its tracks rusted, its promise fading into memory. Operating at less than 2% of its original capacity. What was once the longest railway in sub-Saharan Africa reduced to a shadow of its former glory? But what if I told you that railway is about to rise again? What if that forgotten corridor is about to become the epicenter of a new battle, not fought with weapons, but with infrastructure, investment, and influence? A battle where copper flows like oil, where cobalt becomes the new gold, and where two superpowers vie for the future of a continent. On November 20, 2025, in the capital city of Lusaka, something extraordinary happened. The first Chinese premier to visit Zambia in 28 years stood alongside the presidents and vice presidents of three nations, and together, they broke ground on what may be the most significant infrastructure revival in African history. But here's the question that keeps me awake at night: is this a genuine rebirth of African-Chinese solidarity? Or are we witnessing the opening moves of a grand geopolitical chess game, where Africa's minerals are the prize and its railways are the battleground? Why now, after decades of neglect? Why $1.4 billion? And why does America's Lobito corridor running parallel to the west suddenly matter so much? What does this mean for Zambia's copper, Tanzania's ports, and the 2 million people who live along this historic line? Who really wins when giants compete on African soil? Stay with me, because this story isn't just about trains and tracks. It's about power, prosperity, and the future of an entire region. Factual foundation, background and timeline. The revelation came to light on September 29, 2025, when China, Zambia, and Tanzania finalized a historic agreement in Beijing. But to understand the magnitude of this moment, we must journey back to where it all began. The Tanzania-Zambia Railway Authority, known simply as TAZARA or the Uhuru Railway, was China's first major infrastructure project in Africa. In 1965, when Tanzanian President Julius Nyerere visited Beijing, Chairman Mao Zedong made him a promise that would echo through history: you have your difficulties, and we have ours. But they are not of the same kind. We will help you build this railway, even if we have to forsake building our own. The context was critical. Zambia had gained independence in 1964, but its economy remained hostage to colonial-era logistics. The landlocked nation's copper, the backbone of its economy, had to pass through white minority-ruled Rhodesia and apartheid South Africa to reach the sea. When Rhodesia's Ian Smith declared unilateral independence, Zambia faced economic strangulation. Western powers and international financial institutions all refused to help. The World Bank called the project economically unfeasible. Britain declined. The United States turned away. Even the Soviet Union said no. But China said yes. On September 5, 1967, the three governments signed the agreement in Beijing. China committed an interest-free loan of 988 million yuan, equivalent to approximately $406 million at the time, or $3.29 billion in today's money. Construction began in October 1970. Over the next 5 years and 8 months, 56,000 Chinese engineers and workers, alongside 50,000 Tanzanians and 25,000 Zambians, carved a railway through some of Africa's most unforgiving landscape. They built 320 bridges, excavated 22 tunnels, constructed 93 stations, and moved 330,000 tons of steel rail. The human cost was staggering. 64 Chinese workers sacrificed their lives. They now rest in the Gongo Lamboto Cemetery outside Dar es Salaam, their graves a permanent testament to African-Chinese friendship. The railway opened for full operations on July 14, 1976. It connected Dar es Salaam's port on the Indian Ocean to Kapirimposhi in Zambia's copper-rich heartland, providing the first route for Zambian copper to reach the sea without transiting white-ruled territories. The designation Uhuru Railway, Uhuru being Swahili for freedom, captured its significance perfectly. For a time, TAZARA flourished. Freight traffic peaked at 1.2 million tons in 1986. New towns sprouted along the route. Economic activity bloomed. But then came the decline. The end of apartheid in South Africa and Namibia's independence in 1990 opened alternative routes for Zambian copper. Decades of underinvestment, mismanagement, and mechanical failures took their toll. By fiscal year 2014/2015, freight traffic had collapsed to just 88,000 metric tons. Less than 2% of the railway's design capacity of 5 million tons per year. The revival began quietly. In November 2023, the China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation, (CEC), the same company that built the original line, was shortlisted to submit a revival proposal. In December, Chinese experts inspected the 1,860-kilometer route. By February 2024, China's ambassador to Zambia presented a formal $1 billion proposal to the Zambian transport minister. On September 4, 2024, at the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in Beijing, Presidents Xi Jinping, Samia Suluhu Hassan of Tanzania, and Hakainde Hichilema of Zambia witnessed the signing of a Memorandum of Understanding for TAZARA's revitalization. The final agreement was signed on September 29, 2025. Under the terms, CEC will invest $1.4 billion over a 30-year concession. The breakdown: $1.1 billion for track rehabilitation and infrastructure upgrades, plus $238 million for the purchase of 34 new locomotives, 760 freight wagons, and 18 passenger coaches. The first 3 years will focus on comprehensive reconstruction, track repairs, bridge reinforcement, station upgrades, telecommunications systems, and power supply restoration. The remaining 27 years will involve full commercial operations under CEC management. Then came the ceremonial crescendo. On November 20, 2025, Chinese Premier Li Qiang, the first top Chinese leader to visit Zambia since Premier Wen Jiabao in 2007, attended the groundbreaking ceremony in Lusaka. Flanked by Zambian President Hichilema and Tanzanian Vice President Emmanuel Nchimbi, the three leaders unveiled a commemorative plaque at the Mulungushi International Conference Center. The very next day, boots hit the ground in Kapirimposhi. The transformation of TAZARA had officially begun. Direct evidence. The voices of those present at this historic moment tell the story better than any narrator could. At the March 2025 Zambia International Mining and Energy Conference in Kitwe, TAZARA's CEO Bruno Chingandu made the first public announcement. Standing before mining executives and logistics professionals, he declared, "The investment from CEC will not only restore our railway infrastructure but also position TAZARA as a key enabler of trade and economic growth between Tanzania and Zambia. Through this strategic partnership, we are ensuring that TAZARA remains a competitive and sustainable transport solution for the region." Chingandu later elaborated on the broader implications. This concession will mark the beginning of a new era for TAZARA. The investment will not only restore our railway infrastructure but also position TAZARA as a key enabler of trade and economic growth between Tanzania and Zambia. The managing director was frank about the urgency. The big decision to grant a concession comes after a thorough evaluation of the challenges TAZARA has faced over the years. This therefore necessitated very urgent intervention. When Premier Li Qiang took the podium at the November groundbreaking ceremony, his words carried weight beyond mere diplomatic pleasantries. Speaking before assembled dignitaries, he said, China is willing to work with Zambia and Tanzania to advance the development of a prosperity belt along the TAZARA Railway and jointly foster a new economic growth hub. Li continued, his voice resonating through the conference center. Today, China-Africa cooperation has embarked on a new journey toward the shared dream of modernization. This railway is a landmark project of China-Africa cooperation. China stands ready to work with Zambia and Tanzania to ensure that this railway, brimming with hope, shines with renewed splendor in the new era, and injects greater vitality into the development of Tanzania and Zambia, and even the entire Africa. The premier invoked the legacy of the original builders. The railway serves as a bond that binds the peoples of China, Tanzania, and Zambia closely together. The TAZARA spirit is a precious legacy forged through dedication and hard work, one that should be cherished and safeguarded. President Hakainde Hichilema's response captured the moment's significance for Zambia. With evident emotion, he declared, TAZARA is a symbol of the enduring partnership between Zambia, Tanzania, and China. It is our duty to deepen this partnership. Hichilema emphasized the broader vision. We don't see TAZARA as just a rail line, we see TAZARA as an economic corridor. As trade volumes between Tanzania and Zambia increase, and with China also being a major trading partner, this project should be cherished even more. The Zambian president contextualized the Chinese role in stark historical terms. The Chinese people took a decision to support their brothers and sisters in Zambia in constructing the rail line to open Zambia's trade onto the sea, the Indian Ocean, having had the southern route closed because of the colonial-era issues. Hichilema added a note of contemporary urgency. The TAZARA Railway is potentially more important today than ever before. Tanzania's Vice President Emmanuel John Chimbai, representing President Samia Suluhu Hassan, spoke to the project's transformative potential. The project will significantly strengthen the southern corridor and stimulate trade across Tanzania, Zambia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Malawi, the Southern African Development Community region, and the African continent at large. Chimbai drew inspiration from history. If the founding leaders of Tanzania, Zambia, and China could build the Uhuru Railway in the 1970s, then today, given modern capabilities and resources, the three nations are well positioned to rehabilitate TAZARA and transform it into a 21st century model of trilateral cooperation. The joint statement issued by the three governments read, in part, the governments of China, Tanzania, and Zambia commit to jointly building the TAZARA Railway Prosperity Belt. At a memorial ceremony held earlier in April 2025 at the Gongo la Mboto Cemetery, Tanzanian Deputy Minister for Transport David Kihenzile spoke words that still echo. The governments of Tanzania and Zambia will forever remember the utmost sacrifice that the Chinese people gave during the construction of this railway line. TAZARA Managing Director Bruno Chingandu, standing among the graves of the 70 Chinese workers who died building the railway, reflected, their spirit endures in every train that runs. Their spirit endures in every ton of cargo moved. China's charge d'affaires Wang Yon described the fallen workers as heroes whose legacy continues to symbolize China-Tanzania and China-Africa friendship. They will live forever in the hearts of the Chinese and Tanzanian people, just as the TAZARA Railway stands as a testament to their efforts. Wang added, the TAZARA spirit embodies the essence of China-Africa relations and the common aspiration of the Chinese and African people, serving as a driving force for deepening China-Africa cooperation. These weren't empty diplomatic words. They carried the weight of half a century of shared history and the promise of a transformed future. Deeper analysis, implications and reactions. To understand what this $1.4 billion investment truly means, we must examine it through multiple lenses: economic, geopolitical, strategic, and human. The economic transformation. The numbers tell a compelling story. TAZARA currently operates at approximately 200,000 tons of freight annually, a fraction of its 5 million ton design capacity. The rehabilitation aims to increase capacity to 2.4 million tons within the first 3 years, with projections suggesting even higher volumes once full operations commence. Transit times will be reduced by 2/3, dramatically cutting logistics costs for miners, traders, and manufacturers. For landlocked Zambia, Africa's second-largest copper producer, and the mineral-rich Democratic Republic of Congo, this represents a potential economic revolution. Zambia produces approximately 800,000 tons of copper annually. The DRC contributes another 1.7 million tons. Together, they supply about 10% of global copper demand and hold 70% of the world's cobalt reserves. These minerals are critical for electric vehicle batteries, renewable energy systems, and electronics manufacturing. Currently, much of this material must be trucked through congested routes, delayed at border crossings, or shipped through South African ports that are themselves overwhelmed. The revitalized TAZARA offers an alternative, a faster, more efficient route to the Indian Ocean. The geopolitical chess game. But here's where the story becomes more complex. TAZARA's revival doesn't exist in isolation. It's unfolding against the backdrop of intensifying great power competition in Africa, specifically, the race for critical minerals. Enter the Lobito Corridor. This US and EU-backed project, launched through the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment Initiative, aims to rehabilitate Angola's colonial-era Benguela Railway. The corridor would connect the same Congolese and Zambian mining regions to the Atlantic Ocean via Angola's port of Lobito. The Western Consortium has mobilized nearly $4 billion for the project, with commitments from the United States, European Union, African Development Bank, and private sector partners. Italy recently added $320 million through Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's Mattei Plan for Africa. The strategic implications are stark. While TAZARA offers an eastern route to Asian markets via the Indian Ocean, the Lobito Corridor provides a western route to American and European refineries via the Atlantic. The distance from Zambia's copper belt to Dar es Salaam is approximately 1,860 kilometers. The distance to Lobito is about 1,300 kilometers. Some analysts have called this a corridor war, a competition between China and the West for control over Africa's mineral supply chains. Cameron Hudson of the Center for Strategic and International Studies noted, the Lobito Corridor is really a play out of Beijing's own playbook. It's a chapter in the Belt and Road Initiative that Washington has, I think, finally gotten smart to the benefits of. Critics point out the irony: the United States is essentially copying China's infrastructure for influence model, but arriving decades later to a game China has been playing since the 1960s. Yet the competition narrative may be overly simplistic. Some experts argue these corridors could be complementary rather than competitive. Harry Verhoeven of Columbia University's Center on Global Energy Policy suggests, given that China is now Africa's biggest trading partner and the biggest consumer of African exports, Beijing tends to welcome almost any new or updated infrastructure that can help further consolidate its ties with different economies on the continent. Indeed, Chinese mining companies are already using the partially rehabilitated Lobito Corridor, recognizing that diversified export routes reduce risk and increase efficiency. The regional integration question. Perhaps the most intriguing possibility is physical connection. The Lobito Corridor currently extends to Chingola in the DRC's copper belt. TAZARA connects Tondola, Zambia, just 115 kilometers away. Creating a link between them would fulfill the African Union's long-held dream of an Atlantic to Indian Ocean rail connection. At the 2023 G7 summit in Hiroshima, President Biden himself stated that the Lobito Corridor's goal was ultimately reaching the Indian Ocean, connecting the continent east to west for the first time. Such integration has strong support from the Southern African Development Community and the African Union. However, it remains uncertain whether US and Chinese funders would embrace a unified system, or whether geopolitical tensions would keep the corridors separate. The refining dilemma. There's another layer to consider: where will these minerals be processed? Of the world's top 24 copper refineries, only 4 are accessible from the Atlantic Ocean. The vast majority are in Asia, particularly China, which dominates global mineral refining capacity. China controls 60% of EU critical raw material imports and 98% of rare earth element imports to Europe. This creates a paradox for the Lobito Corridor. Even if minerals exit via Angola's Atlantic coast, many will likely be shipped around Africa's southern tip to Asian refineries anyway, potentially making the eastern TAZARA route more economically efficient. Both African governments and international partners are now pushing for more local refining and value addition. The Democratic Republic of Congo hopes the Lobito Corridor will attract investment in battery precursor plants, which could cost one-third of equivalent facilities in China or the United States. Similar ambitions exist along the TAZARA route. African agency and leverage. Perhaps the most important question is what all this means for African nations themselves. Evans Wala Chabala, a policy consultant and former chief executive of Zambia's Securities and Exchange Commission, offered this sobering assessment. The reality of the Lobito corridor development is that it may be coming too late in the day, since most of the supply has already been locked in by China. Yet others see opportunity in the competition. The entry of multiple external players, China, the United States, the European Union, potentially gives African governments greater negotiating leverage. President Hichilema has skillfully positioned Zambia to benefit from both corridors, refusing to choose sides in a binary competition. Tanzania's integration of the TAZARA revitalization into its broader infrastructure development plans, including its new standard gauge railway network, suggests a strategy of maximizing connectivity rather than picking geopolitical camps. The human impact. Beyond the geopolitics and economics are the 2 million people living along the TAZARA route. For communities in places like Mlimba, Makambako, and Mbeya in Tanzania, and towns across Zambia's central province, the railway's decline has meant economic stagnation. The original railway spurred development. Towns emerged. Schools and health centers were built. Markets flourished. The decline reversed all of this. The revival promises to restore economic vitality but will also bring challenges of displacement, environmental impact, and social change. TAZARA's workforce faces an uncertain future. The current Tanzanian and Zambian employees, many nearing retirement, wonder what the SEC concession means for their jobs, their pensions, and their communities. Questions without easy answers. As work begins on the ground, fundamental questions remain. Will SEC's 30-year concession truly transfer knowledge and build local capacity, or will it entrench Chinese control over a critical African asset? Can Tanzania and Zambia ensure that increased mineral exports translate into broader economic development, not just raw material extraction? Will environmental safeguards protect the sealess game reserve and other sensitive ecosystems the railway traverses? How will the benefits be distributed? Will the prosperity reach rural communities along the route, or concentrate in mining regions and port cities? And perhaps most importantly, in this new era of infrastructure competition, will Africa's railways serve African development, or merely facilitate the extraction of African resources for external benefit? These are the questions we must grapple with as the TAZARA revival unfolds.